Thank you, David. That was fun. I'd forgotten that one. So it's fun to go back and see these Father's Day songs. This time I didn't need 7 Kleenex, so that was an improvement. So thank you to everyone who chose to be here today in this spiritual community. We're glad you chose to be with us. We appreciate you. And happy Father's Day to all those biological fathers, stepdads, those who wanted to be dads but couldn't work it out, those who serve the function of guide, counsel, support, and acceptance that the ideal father would give. Um, Everybody's got their own particular story in that, and we all get to come to peace with that in one way or another. So today, in recognition of Father's Day, I'll be talking about signposts and guides, which include all those individuals who supported us each in becoming who we have become and who we will continue to become. And at the same time, I do believe that most of us serve as signposts and guides for others in some way or other, whether we know it or not. And even more than that, we're surrounded by signposts and guides that show us in bold, glaring, exacting detail how we don't want to live. We get to decide what to do with all these different signs and which signs to focus on and which ones to follow or copy. So it's useful to have some solid basis to stand on, some capital T truth that we can use as a basis to compare and contrast the rest of our life experiences. So think for a second, what are your capital T truths? When Shelley was doing the meditation or the prayer before the meditation, she talked about one of hers, which is love. It's also one of mine. But what are your capital T truths, and how do they show up in your own lived experience? If you're not sure, think about that later and figure it out, because that will be a useful signpost for you in checking out the rest of what happens in your life. For me, one of my signposts is spelled out in a passage from Dr. Ernest Holmes from the Science of Mind text, page 502, paragraph 7. It starts, God's love is complete in us, in that we are its emanations, the emanations of freedom and not of bondage. On page 503, he continues, now we are of God, not later, not in the hereafter, but in the now. We are just what we are and what we must be because of our true natures. Now we are of God. The birth of the soul into the light of spirit is an awakening to the realization that God has been with us all the time. Holmes continues and talks about how we don't know this capital T truth about ourselves, that we're already divine. It's already in there. It's already as us. And so we go looking outside of ourselves for other people to fix what's wrong. Whether it's what's wrong with them or what's wrong with us is, debatable. But what's really wrong, if we're not seeing divinity in form, is our way of seeing and our way of choosing to interact with our world and all the individuals in it. Further down on page 503, starting at paragraph 6, Holmes wrote, God is greater than all human mistakes, and in God alone is peace and happiness. God is natural goodness and eternal loving kindness. Who is born of love is born of God, for God is love. You've heard that before, right? Without love, nothing can be accomplished. With love, all things are possible. And when we love, our prayers are answered, and the gift of heaven is made. The gift of heaven is life, not death, love, not hate, peace, not confusion. Love is greater than all else and covers a multitude of mistakes. Love overcomes everything and neutralizes all that is unlike itself. Love is God. And I keep thinking about Martin Buber in the philosopher I talked about earlier. He made a distinction. We have two kinds of relationships. We have an I-thou relationship, where we treat the other person that we engage with as though they are divine, or an I-it relationship, where we treat other people as things to be used. And it's really hard to see sometimes how we are engaging with someone who is different from us. When we remember that we are already divine, of God, of love, and so is everyone else, and we treat everyone that way, we actually have a different sort of relationship with them. And sometimes we're not paying attention. We're not aware of how we think about and treat other people in our world until something happens to wake us up. And waking up is hard because it means we have to shift out of what's familiar. We have to shift out of our comfort zone. And it's also critical to our ability to experience ourselves and others as worthy, divine beings that we have an I-thou relationship with. Part of me wishes it would be some other way, but it's not. If we wish to be more awake, if we wish to be more conscious, if we wish to be more aware, we need to be able to see all beings with the eyes of love, with the point of view as divine speaking to divine. The original meaning of namaste, the divine in me sees the divine in you, and I act that way towards you, whoever you happens to be. Khalil Gibran wrote, I have learned silence from the talkative, tolerance from the intolerant, kindness from the unkind. Strange that I am ungrateful to these teachers. It's very difficult to remember at all times we're staring in the face of divinity, whether we're looking in the mirror or whether we're looking at another person who may or may not be acting the way we think they ought to be. And my point of view about how you should be behaving is mine. It's not yours. And it doesn't have any bearing on your divinity. That's my junk I get to work out. And we're always tripping over our signposts and guides, and we just don't see them. That's certainly becoming more and more evident as the days go past. I made space in my day on Friday to attend Cynthia James's 90-minute Conversations of the Heart on Friday night. I posted this event on our center's Facebook page as soon as I saw it, because it was open to anyone who wanted to participate. There were 65 or 70 women on the call, and Cynthia is marvelous. She created a safe space for conversation, and she set very clear boundaries and ground rules. I language, personal experience, no politics, no shaming, blaming, guilting, none of that crap. Just really, here's how I feel. Here's what I'm experiencing. And it was remarkable because she split us up into breakout rooms, which is something I haven't done with you guys yet. And every single person who was on the call had 5 minutes which seems like an eternity when you're doing it, to talk about how they were feeling about the current world situation. Not what they were thinking, not what they wanted to see, not what ought to be or should be, but how they were feeling, what their personal lived experience was. And the groups were random. It was just however the computer decided to sort us out. And I was in a group with um, two, me and one other woman kind of sort of like me, and then three people who were really very different, three women who were really very different. And it was just so sweet to be able to just sit in that mindset of love and listen and feel like I was able to support them and feel the support and the love from them as I spoke what I needed to say. No judgment, just here's what I'm feeling, here's the space I'm in. And it went a long way towards making each of us feel more adept and moving forward in a way that makes us more effective in engaging with our world at this time. So then after we had this conversation in our small group, she brought us all back into the larger room. And then she did this really sneaky thing. She did a brief meditation, and I was doing the meditation, so I wasn't watching how she was doing it. And it was not recorded, which I thought was magnificent because it made it very private and very personal to the people who decided to show up. But after the meditation, she asks us all to grab a piece of paper and write down, just almost without thinking, what judgments we were holding about other people. People we thought of as perpetrators, people who were doing bad things. And since I had just listened to these four other women share their experience, I had some stuff. And I just was writing as fast and furious as I could. And then Cynthia did the thing. It wasn't a gotcha. It could be seen that way, but it wasn't. It was a very sharp point, though, of awakening and awareness. She said, now look at your list of judgments. Do you see how you hold any of those same judgments against yourself? Do you see how you're living from those judgments in your life? Well, yeah, of course. Not exactly the same form, but certainly the same ideas. And if I'm thinking hateful thoughts and holding hateful points of view, how am I different than those people that are acting them out? Since we know that thought creates reality, there's no difference. Boy, that was a back straightener. She reminded us all that we each only have the power to change ourselves, and our thought is the place that we do that. Negative self-judgment and recrimination, oh my God, I should have known better and I shouldn't have done that, doesn't help, it doesn't serve, no one benefits, and it keeps us stuck and locked into an ineffective position. By waking up and recognizing our own ownership of our part of what's broken in our world and cleaning out of our own closets, cleaning out the garbage that's under the bed, we stand a chance of being able to stand as love during a heated or improper situation. And then we can make a real difference in the world. From the daily practice last week, we had a reading, a brief one, from Ralph Waldo Emerson. When I read it the first time, it made me laugh, and it's true. People wish to be settled, and only as far as they are unsettled is there any hope for them. I'll read that again because I mangled it. People wish to be settled, only as far as they are unsettled is there any hope for them. So if we're unhappy with the state of things in our world, we have a lot of good material to work with. And the place we start is in our own minds and our own consciousness. You have heard before, you've probably said, as within, so without. It starts inside of us. The outside world must show us what we think. That's how the law of cause and effect works. Cause is always mental, always a series of thoughts, always a set of beliefs about ourselves and others, or a point of view that we hold dearly. When we learn to look at what we have in our world, what we experience in our world as aids to waking up, our way of seeing what we experience begins to change. So how do you think about a person who refuses to wear a mask, or crowds you in the grocery store, or breathes down your neck or in your face, or the person who is pushing or shoving or yelling inappropriately? How do you see them? How do you think about them? What is the feeling that arises? Can we get to a place where we can see these people with love? It doesn't mean we agree with them or support necessarily what they're doing, but can we see their divinity? Can we look at them with those God eyes? That is a very challenging, difficult, and useful point of view. Because until we can do that, we can't really help. These people help us by helping us wake up. It's a very, very difficult and serious practice not to be triggered by other people. So I want to talk for just a minute about the value of those guides and signposts that we have, especially the ones we don't like. I have this little book on my shelf. I've had it for a long time. It's out of print, I expect. The author's name is Frank Rivers. It's called The Way of the Owl, Succeeding with Integrity in a Conflicted World. He's talking about a good enemy. A good enemy is a creature of immense value. He holds our feet to the fire and makes us dig for new capabilities and latent talents. He makes us stretch. He watches what we pay attention to. And when we become distracted, he reminds us with a clean and focused strike. He challenges us where we are weak, keeping us slightly off balance, and forces us to continually readjust. His tactics are mixed and unpredictable. In this, the good enemy is an ally, a teacher, and possibly even a healer. Learning to be able to see a difficult situation as a good enemy, someone who is perhaps unintentionally helping us be more conscious, is extremely valuable, even if it doesn't feel like it at the moment. In the reading, in the morning practice yesterday, we were talking about seeds and caterpillars. The seed has to be drastically changed before the plant that is within it already can germinate and grow. And the caterpillar has to be completely transformed before it can be a butterfly. It's almost unrecognizable, except for genetically. They're related, they're the same. On the outside, they look really different. How can we find our wholeness, find our signpost, our solid spot where we can hold on to love as us, truth as us, and then engage with whoever from that place, then we can make a difference in the world, and it will be powerful and it will be effective. It's the only thing that works, right? We know this. Next month, I'll be talking about blind spots and triggers and what we can do about them. I have a suggested book for you if you wish to follow along. I've listed it in the newsletter and I'll run it again this week. It's called Triggers: How We Can Stop Reacting and Start Healing. It's by David Rico, the same Buddhist psychotherapist guy who wrote 5 Things We Cannot Change, a book study that Pat Masters led last spring. I have a quote from William James. I am done with great things and big plans, great institutions and big successes. I am for those tiny, invisible, loving human forces that work from individual to individual, creeping through the crannies of the world, like so many rootlets, or like the capillary oozing of water, which given enough time will rend the hardest moments of human pride. So there's 2 more things I want to say before I close. One, I posted on the Facebook page this morning a piece from Dr. Howard Thurman, and I'm not going to read it to you, it's on the Facebook page, but the sentence at the top of the page, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Let me remember what it is that's important. Let me remember why I am here, what I am here for. And since my book that just had the second quote in it fell off the table and is on the floor and closed, I can't read you the Martin Luther King quote. But you know this one too. Darkness creates darkness. Only light creates light. We have to choose. We get to pick. So when you want to get angry and you want to start making noise and fighting back and being unlovely, remember that darkness creates darkness. Light creates light. So I want to close with the parable of the trapeze from Dan and Perry, from a little book called Warriors of the Heart. This may be vaguely familiar to some of you. It's part of the Prosperity Plus 3 curriculum. I mentioned it to Sunday 6 months ago or so, and I'll put it in the newsletter so you can read it again. Sometimes I feel that my life is a series of trapeze swings. I'm either hanging onto the bar, swinging along, or for a few moments in my life, I'm hurtling across space, in between trapeze bars. Most of the time, I spend my life hanging on for dear life to my trapeze bar of the moment. It carries me at a certain predictable, steady rate. And I have the feeling I'm in control of my life. I know most of the right answers and even some of the questions. But every once in a while, as I'm merrily or even not so merrily swinging along, I look out ahead of me into the distance, and what do I see? Another trapeze bar swinging towards me. It's empty, and I know, in that place in me that knows, that this new trapeze bar has my name on it. It's my next step, my growth, my aliveness coming to get me. In my heart of hearts, I know that. For me to grow, I must release my grip on the present, well-known bar and move to the new one. Each time it happens, I hope, no, I pray that I won't have to actually let go of the new old bar completely before I grab the new one. But in my knowing place, I know that I must totally release my grasp on the old bar, and for some moment in time, I must hurtle across space before I can grab onto the new bar. Every single time, I am filled with terror. It doesn't matter that in all my previous hurdles across the void of unknowing, I have always made it. I am every single time afraid I will miss, that I will be crushed on the unseen rocks at the bottomless chasm between the bars. I do it anyway, because this is the essence of what the mystics call the faith experience. No guarantees, no net, no insurance policy, but you do it anyway, because somehow to keep hanging on to that old familiar bar is no longer on the viable list of alternatives. So for an eternity that can last a microsecond or 1,000 lifetimes, I soar across the dark void of the past is gone and the future is not yet here. It's called transition. I have come to believe that this transition is the only place real change occurs. I mean real change, not pseudo change that only lasts until the next time my buttons get pushed. I have noticed in our culture, this transition zone is looked upon as a no thing, a no place between places. Sure, the old trapeze bar was real, and the new one that's coming, well, I hope that's real too. But the space in between? That's just a scary, confusing, disorienting nowhere that must be gotten through as fast and as unconsciously as possible. No, actually, what a wasted opportunity that would be. I have a sneaky suspicion that the transition zone is the only real thing, and the bars are the illusions we dream up, to avoid the void where the real change, the real growth occurs for us. Whether or not my hunch is true, it remains that transition zones are incredibly rich places. They should be honored, even savored. Yet with all the pain and fear and feelings of being out of control that can, but don't necessarily accompany transitions, they are still the most alive, most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments of our lives. Step into that growth zone. Step into that divine you that wants to be birthed in this time of immense possibility, and change according to your highest truth, your own capital T truth, and live expansively from that. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now I want to roll straight into the prayer. So take a breath with me and breathe into that divine you, that divine self that lives as you, that knows the wholeness, that lives as all beings, that knows the divine love at the core of life, that knows the life and the joy and the peace and the harmony and the value of all beings. Step into that awareness of the divinity, the great big huge divinity of all, and recognize you are part of that. And so are those people that seem to be opposing you. each one lives as a facet, an aspect, a component of that divine presence. And when I can remember that, and I can see that and focus on that and live from that space, then each one of us has ground to stand on that is common. Each one of us has a chance of seeing that divinity in the other, that divine self in the other, and standing in that place of wholeness, standing in that place of love. Even though this is not how the world lives, even though this is a very challenging and difficult task, I believe it's the only way real change can occur. Because seeing life and as love gives everyone a chance to up-level and become this new being, this new divine self. Man, it's a lot of work. And it's really, really good work when each one, every single one, steps into it. So I choose to do my best to walk this new road, this new bright pathway, which doesn't hide, it doesn't pretend like there are things that are wrong, that are not wrong. It sees the world as it is, and it sees the world as it is in the light of love. So I strive to move my consciousness to this loving place. And I know as I do that, then my world has to change. I see this as a great, huge challenge in this world right now that we live in our senses. And I also see it through eyes of the divine and see it as whole and holy. And I bless that image of this beautiful world. Breathing into that awareness, I relax, allow, and let be. And so it is.